Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Hi mate. Hello. Hi doggo. This week, there's no doubt I'm in the north of England because I've come to Lancashire, apparently the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, but I think Shropshire might want to have a word about that. But Lancashire does have its own signature dish known as the Lancashire hot pot. It's all right. In the 1970s, the county had a bit of a reshuffle of its borders, leading to a reduction in size, but this means my guidebook thinks Lancashire is larger than it is, but we'll work it out as we go along on a journey from Skelmersdale to Preston. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps and Skelmersdale. How unfortunate. Skelmersdale is often abbreviated to Skem, which sounds like the sort of thing I'd clean off my toilet bowl, and it looks similar too with its horrific architecture. Skem, is a new town. In the days of my guidebook, there were only around 6,500 people living here, but in the 1960s, it was earmarked for redevelopment, giving us the town we know and love today. My guidebook makes no suggestions on things to see or do, bearing in mind back then Skem was a lot smaller. Annoyingly, this means we could have gotten away with not coming here, but it's too late now. In the old days, the town was mostly busy within the coal mining and brick industries, but following new town redevelopment, there's little to no trace of these industries left today. No, I give up. I can't find anything good to talk about in Skem, so we're moving on, and I've come to a place called Ormskirk, which is just up the road. In the days of my guidebook, it was larger than Skelmersdale, but following its new town redevelopment, that's no longer the case. My guidebook suggests maybe we'd like to take a look at the local parish church, which we will because it has an interesting design feature. Like most old churches, it's existed in one way, shape or form for centuries. In this case, it's believed to date back to the 5th century, but nobody knows for sure. It doesn't matter anyway because the original structures have long since been replaced, leading to a peculiar setup where it has both a tower and a spire that are built at one end of the church, and they're all sort of part of the same structure. It's one of 3 churches in the country that has both a tower and a spire, but the only one where they're built at the same end, and they were added to the church in the 1500s. Well, this has been rather boring so far. Hopefully a trip to the seaside will make up for it. A simple start to the journey, as we'll need to head along the A570 from Ormskirk. That's about it. However, before we get too carried away, there's something I want to take a look at a short distance to the north of Ormskirk, so there will be a slight delay in getting to the seaside. I've come to a place known as, this is one of those place names which nobody knows how to pronounce properly. I've done my research this time, however, and whilst it's spelled like this, it's pronounced Burscough, which is still probably wrong. It doesn't matter, I've come to look at an old runway, and it's interesting because the airfield that it sits on, known as HMS Ringtail, was a naval airfield and wasn't opened by the RAF. This means it was mostly used for training purposes, and in this case they used it for practicing landing and takeoff suitable for aircraft carrier flights. Another interesting thing is that the airfield would have had 4 runways. This is the way that the Navy liked to do things rather than use the traditional 3 A-shaped runway setup. Whilst today it's a fairly derelict and nondescript site, in its heyday it would have covered 650 acres with 32 hangars and a 3-storey control tower. On the south side of the site are 4 surviving hangars, but there's no sign of the control tower. Something that I thought was worth a mention is that Bersco was once home to an electric vehicle manufacturer, which was set up in 1923, the same year as my guidebook's publication. There isn't much left of the factory that was once on Victoria Street, so you'll have to use your imagination a bit, but here they produced electric vehicles like milk floats, small trucks and even battery-powered locomotives. Strangely, the company was set up by a bakery who were looking for cheap transport vehicles and, not having found what they were looking for, decided, sod it, we'll build our own. So they set up Victor Electrics to build these vehicles, and they stayed in business until the 1970s. Right, let's get on, and we're off to the seaside. How exciting, because we all know there's nothing better than an English seaside town, especially those in the north of England. We'll be using the A570. Yep, it hasn't changed all that much until we reach the outskirts of Southport, where there's a massive fuck-off roundabout and retail park. None of which existed back in the day, but in the middle of the large roundabout are the remains of the old road, which, until the roundabout came along to replace it, was part of a simple fork junction. The seaside, yay! Oh, it's not very good. This is Southport, in the days of my guidebook, a very busy town with around 69,000 residents, although today, technically, it's not in Lancashire, but in the days of my guidebook, it was, so that'll do. Despite what it looks like, the town was once a very popular tourist destination before cheap air travel became a thing, and this is most likely why the town grew to be so large, and today, it's just about hanging in there. Interesting beach-related items at Southport include the pier, which opened in 1860 and appears to be constructed mostly over land rather than out to sea, but it is the second longest pier in the country, even if they cheated a bit. And in 1920, the beach was used as a venue by Henry Seagrave to set a world land speed record of 152 miles an hour in a V12 supercharged Sunbeam Tiger. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit the Esplanade. Okay, here it is, and I don't really know what it wants me to look at. However, nearby is a very interesting tourist attraction that I know some of you are going to love. It's the Southport Model Railway Village. Be sure to have your anoraks and thermos flasks on standby. It's a 1 in 18 scale, 500-metre long railway that features models based on Lancashire and Merseyside building designs, and from what I understand, they're all individually handcrafted on site. It opened in the mid-1990s after local residents Ray and Jean approached the local council to build this impressive layout on what was previously derelict land. Of course, they said yes, and the UK's first model railway village opened, and it's obviously been well received because it's still in business today. If you prefer your locomotives a little bit larger, then why not check out the Lakeside or Pleasureland Miniature Railway, which is found just across the lake from the Model Railway Village. It's the oldest operating 15-inch gauge railway, having opened in 1911, and I've run out of things to tell you. What an exciting place Southport is. Sadly, we must move on, and I'm going to cheat and drive along Marine Drive. It didn't exist in the old days, but it's a road built on salt marshes and reclaimed land, which I thought was interesting. Once that's out of the way, we'll pick up the A565 and then the A59, which, in order to stay on the original route, requires a turn-off at Wolmer Bridge because a new bypass was built, and it's the same situation as we pass through Penwortham, but before long we arrive at our next destination. The city of Preston, a large place even in the days of my guidebook when over 117,000 people lived here. Unlike Southport with its beautiful beaches, maybe, Preston grew in size because it was an industrial town with several large cotton mills and textile mills setting up in the town or city, leading to an economic boom. But this fell into a sharp decline, and by the 1950s these had all mostly closed. However, many of the mills survive, now repurposed and used for other things. One such example is Tolkath Mill, which is one of the more recently constructed mills built in 1905, and it was built to be as fireproof as possible because they sort of burnt down their previous mill by accident. At the time, it was one of the largest mills in the county, and today it's noticeable from all around by way of its chimney stack, which used to be accompanied by a water tower because the mill was steam-powered. And interestingly, the chimney stack has been shortened, once in the 1930s and then again in the 1960s. Now, if you're going to be making things and spinning cotton or whatever, you'll need a way to transport your goods, and in the old days, the best way was by boat. And maybe your boat would sail from the Albert Edward Dock, which opened in 1892. At the time, it was the largest single basin dock in Europe, measuring 910 metres in length, 180 metres wide, and covering an area of 42 acres. And when it first opened, it flopped. Within the first year of operation, only a handful of boats would use it, but this would soon turn around when the railways were extended to the dock, allowing for the easy transportation of goods. It wasn't to last forever though, and by the 1970s, the dock was struggling, mainly because of the River Ribble, which is what it connects up to, allowing boats to make their way to sea. The river was constantly shifting and required regular dredging, and this cost an absolute fortune, leading to the dock making financial losses before finally closing in 1981. My guidebook recommends that if one would like to spend the night in Preston, which you don't, but if you did, maybe you'd like to stay at the Park Hotel, which opened in 1883. Today, staying the night might be a bit of a challenge. It was abandoned by the local council in 2011, but it wasn't a hotel by that time anyway. It was originally owned and built by a railway company, and it's no coincidence that Preston railway station is situated next door, and at one point there was some sort of direct connection between the hotel and the station platforms. The hotel passed between owners, much like the railway, and eventually it would become the offices for the local council, who didn't look after it or use it to its full potential, deciding to construct a completely new building next door to use instead, which was demolished a few years ago. And who says councils are wasteful? The latest pipe dreams are to reopen the building as a hotel, which has been attempted many times before, but nobody seems to be able to get it past the planning and paperwork stages, which is still the case today as far as I know, and thus the building is still sat here abandoned. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet. Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name is John. You've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.